At 16, Kana died alone in a snowy alley, not from some grand battle, but from hunger, cold, and the cruelty of people who treated even discarded food like territory. Then she opened her eyes on a floating island with red scales, wings, claws, and no idea why the world had given her a second life. But being reborn as a dragon wasn't an instant escape. Her wings couldn't fly, the mountain offered no easy way down, and an ancient temple across a collapsing bridge seemed almost determined to trap her inside. Worse, the ghost waiting beyond its barrier claimed Kana was something nearly extinct, and that without a system she might never evolve at all. Then the forest introduced her to monsters far beyond her level and 5 human adventurers who needed her help. Kana expected betrayal from humans. What she didn't expect was for that betrayal to come with 10 soldiers, a reward, and a plan to capture her alive. Now, surrounded by 15 enemies, Kana has one question to answer. Can a level 4 dragon protect the one human who chose her side, and what happens to the people who mistake her kindness for weakness? A snowflake drifted down through the cloudy winter sky as the city continued moving beneath it. Lights reflected across the fresh snow, while cars and pedestrians passed through the streets. Even during the coldest part of winter, the city remained lively. But in a forgotten back alley where people abandoned by society searched for anything useful, a small figure crouched beside a dumpster. At first glance, she looked no older than 10. Her body was pale, sickly, and severely malnourished, suggesting that her growth had been stunted. In reality, she was older than she appeared. Her clothes were tattered and completely unsuitable for the snow. Still, she continued rummaging through the dumpster, hoping to find even one scrap of food. Nothing. She had already been searching for hours. Her exposed hands and skin had turned purple from the cold, and tears began gathering in her eyes. She wondered whether the people who usually searched through this dumpster had already taken everything. Then a side door opened. A young man stepped outside carrying a black trash bag. The girl vanished into the shadows before he noticed her. Complaining about the cold, he quickly threw the bag into the dumpster and hurried back inside. Once the door clicked shut, the alley became quiet again. The girl slowly emerged from hiding. Her eyes widened as she caught the smell coming from the bag. She had also noticed the building's appearance and recognized it as a restaurant. If the restaurant was throwing out trash, there was a chance that the bag contained food. That possibility gave her a rare, faint smile. She rushed toward the dumpster, climbed inside, and tore the bag open. Food scraps spilled into view, and some of them were still warm. Among them was a half-eaten hamburger. She grabbed it immediately and shoved it into her mouth. The warmth and taste of actual food struck her so strongly that her taste buds almost hurt. It had been a long time since she had eaten anything like it. For a brief moment, the freezing alley and her empty stomach were no longer the only things in her world. Then a metal pole slammed against the dumpster. The impact echoed through the container and hurt her ears. Standing outside was a homeless man dressed in several layers of torn, dirty clothing. He had missing teeth, a frayed winter hat, and fingerless gloves. His appearance was rough, but it was the hostility in his eyes that frightened her most. He accused her of stealing food from his territory. The girl looked up at him in horror and weakly tried to explain that she had only eaten one thing, but he refused to accept that. He ordered her out, then reached into the dumpster and grabbed her by her long black hair. He yanked hard enough to lift her from the container. The girl cried out and begged him to stop. She tried to pull herself upward so that less weight would hang from her hair, but the pain on her scalp only worsened. When she reached toward him, the man shoved her away and threw her into a pile of trash bags. The bags softened the impact. Without them, the fall could have killed her immediately. She curled up on the ground, clutching the top of her head and hoping the assault was over. The man removed the black bag from the dumpster, placed it into his cart, and began pushing it down the alley. For a moment, it seemed he was leaving. Then he stopped beside her. He snorted and kicked her in the leg. He told her to stay away from his area and cursed her for wasting his food. After that, he continued down the alley, the squeaking wheels of his cart gradually fading into the distance. The girl stayed still until she was certain he had gone. Only then did she raise her head and breathe out in relief. When she tried to stand, a sharp pain shot through her leg. Looking down, she saw a large gash where the kick had injured her. She could barely react. Her body had already been drained by the cold, hunger, and hours spent searching for food. She lay back in the snow and stared at the sky. The snowfall became heavier, covering the alley and the figure lying beneath it. Her pitch-black eyes slowly lost their focus. A single snowflake landed on her nose, and her purple lips parted as she reflected on the cruelty she had suffered. To Kana, humans seemed like demons wearing disguises. She feared and hated that cruelty, and after everything she had endured, she no longer wanted to be human. If she ever had the chance to be reborn, she would rather become a bug. Her eyelids gradually closed. The cold that had tormented her body began to disappear. It was not because she had become warm. Instead, she could no longer feel it. A sense of peace spread through her as she understood what was happening. Kana had been an orphan, and she had survived alone in a world that gave her no protection and almost no hope. At 16 years old, despite looking no older than 10, her struggle finally came to an end. In the snowy alley beneath the falling flakes, Kana died alone. Under a bright blue sky, birds sang above a mountain covered in thick greenery. White clouds drifted silently through the air while ice and snow remained frozen around the rocky peak. Far below, an enormous forest stretched across the land. In the distance, floating islands hovered in the sky, each covered in plants and surrounded by waterfalls spilling over their edges. Whatever world Kana had entered, it was nothing like the city she had died in. A bright red column of light suddenly descended onto a small ledge high on the mountain. When it faded, a strange creature remained curled up among the grass and bushes. It had red scales covering its entire body, a long pointed tail, two short black horns with a reddish tint, and a pair of folded wings on its back. The creature twitched as a warm breeze moved through the leaves, then its eyes opened. Kana immediately wondered whether she had really died. She remembered the snowy alley and the end of her old life, so waking up on a grassy mountainside made no sense. At first, she thought she might be in a park. Then she noticed the floating islands in the distance and realized this was clearly not Earth. Trying to rub her eyes only made the situation more confusing. She had red scales instead of skin, sharp claws instead of hands, and a tail that she could move freely. When she tested her limbs, everything responded naturally. She even discovered that she could speak. The realization slowly reached her. She had been reborn. Kana, remembering her full name, proudly introduced herself as Nagano Kana. She believed that someone, or perhaps some god, had heard her final wish and given her another chance at life. She did not know who was responsible, but she was grateful. Her only complaint was that she had almost become a bug. Even that, she decided, would have been preferable to returning as a human. Kana stood up and examined her new body. She shook each of her limbs, moved her tail, and unfolded her wings. The wings could flap, but they could not lift her even a centimeter off the ground. She still found the red scales and oversized tail amusing, and for a moment she entertained herself by shaking her tail and dancing on the ledge. Once the excitement faded, Kana wondered whether this world would provide some kind of status system. She tried imagining a command such as status, expecting a menu to appear in front of her. Nothing happened. There was no screen and no explanation waiting for her. That left her with only the life she had been given. Kana promised herself that she would live better this time. Her previous existence as a street orphan had been filled with hunger and violence, and she wanted nothing more to do with humans after being beaten for trying to eat. Her last meal had at least been warm, but that was not enough to change how she felt about them. When those thoughts began dragging her mood down, Kana slapped both sides of her face and told herself to keep going. Then she properly examined her surroundings. There were bushes, rocks, grass, and one major problem. She was standing on a narrow ledge high above the forest. Looking over the edge, Kana saw treetops far below that appeared smaller than ants. She had no way to fly, and the drop was far too great to simply jump. For a moment, she wondered whether she had been reborn only to starve to death on a mountainside. Instead of panicking, Kana searched the cliff face. Small protrusions covered the rock, giving her possible handholds. She tested the stone with one claw and watched it slice into the surface easily. That gave her an idea. If her claws could dig into the mountain, she might be able to climb. Kana first tested the method by climbing upward. She drove one claw into the rock, reached higher with the other, and used her back feet to create additional footholds. After some trial and error, she managed to climb approximately 2 meters. That proved she could cling to the wall, but going down would be more dangerous. She shifted sideways until she had a clear section of rock, then began lowering herself. Her claws held firmly at first, but she nearly slipped when one of her feet lost its grip. Kana quickly stabilized herself and continued until she returned to the original ledge. The test confirmed that climbing down was possible, as long as she moved carefully and stopped whenever she found a secure place to rest. Unfortunately, the first reachable ledge was still a considerable distance below. Kana considered spreading her wings if she fell, hoping they might at least help her glide. She still did not know what kind of creature she had become. A flying lizard was one possibility, but she wondered whether she might actually be a dragon. For now, though, the name did not matter. With no way to fly and no food in sight, Kana had to get off the mountain. She took a breath, dug her claws into the cliff face, and began her descent. Kana kept her body pressed flat against the mountain and carefully dug her claws into the ordinary rock. The descent was far slower than she expected. She moved a little at a time, trying to reach the lower ledge without losing her grip. To her, the climb felt slower than time itself. The wind made everything worse. Every so often, a strong gust rushed up the mountain and nearly tore her away from the cliff face. Kana complained that after this experience, anyone who invited her mountain climbing would get a tail in the face. Even so, she decided this was still better than the life she had escaped. Before arriving in this world, she had been sold, beaten, and treated horribly by humans. Compared to that, clinging to a mountain was frightening, but at least it was her own choice. At last, Kana reached the next ledge. It was much smaller than the one above, but it gave her somewhere to stand. She pushed away from the wall, spun in midair, and landed on her hind legs. Then, despite the dangerous surroundings, she struck a ridiculous pose with one paw on her hip, the other raised in a V sign, and one eye closed. Before she could enjoy the landing, a sweet smell reached her. Kana followed it to a group of bushes growing beside the cliff. Large, round fruits covered in rainbow colors hung from the branches, and their scent immediately attracted her. Kana had no idea whether the fruit was poisonous, but hunger made the risk seem worth considering. Unfortunately, the bushes were too high for her small body. Standing on her hind legs still was not enough. She then tried balancing on her tail to gain a little more height. That gave her just enough reach to touch one of the rainbow fruits, but when she stretched farther to grab it, she lost her balance. Kana fell backward into the bushes without realizing they concealed a small cave entrance. The opening was only about twice her size and its floor sloped sharply downward. Instead of landing safely, she began tumbling through the hidden passage. She bounced off the slope, struck rocks, and slammed against the cave walls on both sides. By the time she reached the bottom, she hit the ground with a heavy thud. Kana slowly checked her limbs and was relieved to find no broken bones, cuts, or scrapes. However, she quickly discovered that her rear end hurt far more than anything else. A rock had lodged in an extremely embarrassing place during the fall. Kana was horrified that her first serious injury in this new world involved being attacked by a stone. With considerable effort, she pulled herself free, clenched her cheeks, and stood there in relief. Her body was not broken, but her dignity had suffered badly. After shaking the dust from her scales, Kana finally examined the cavern. It was dark, dry, and completely lacking in moisture. A deep drop-off split the cave, disappearing into a black abyss below. On the opposite side was another section of the cavern, connected to her side by an ancient wooden bridge that looked unsafe enough to collapse at any moment. But the bridge was not the strangest thing there. Beyond the abyss stood a large temple carved directly into the cave rock. Its age and hidden location made it look completely out of place. Kana felt as though something from inside the temple was calling to her and urging her to enter. She stared at it for a moment, then rejected the idea. Whatever was waiting inside could be a ghost or something that wanted to eat her. For now, Kana decided the safest choice was to retreat and try climbing back toward the cave entrance. Kana's plan to climb back toward the cave entrance failed almost immediately. The slope and the walls around it were made from a different type of rock than the mountain outside, and her claws could not dig into the surface. Without footholds, she had nothing to grip. She tried running up the slope anyway, but only made it a few meters before sliding back down. No matter how hard she pushed, she could not gain enough traction to escape. The route behind her was effectively unclimbable. Kana looked around and noticed another passage behind the temple. That left her with only one direction to go, even though it was the direction she wanted least. She complained to herself about being forced toward a temple that looked like it might contain a ghost or something that could eat her. The situation also reminded her of an old factory where she had once hidden overnight while escaping people she suspected were human traffickers. Even while panicking, Kana realized she had fallen back into her habit of talking to herself. With no way back up the slope, she reluctantly approached the ancient wooden bridge. She placed her front right foot on the first board and pushed down carefully. The board immediately wobbled and swayed beneath her. To Kana, it looked less like a path and more like another death trap. There were no handrails, and even if there had been, her small body would not have been able to use them. If she fell, the deep abyss below would kill her. So Kana used the same method that had helped her cross the cliff wall. She pressed her body against the bridge, dug in with her claws, and moved forward while keeping her eyes fixed straight ahead. She refused to make any unnecessary movement, worried that even a slight shift could shake the bridge apart. The crossing took what felt like an eternity. In reality, Kana spent about 30 minutes crawling across a bridge that should have taken only a few minutes to cross. She moved so slowly that she was practically creeping forward one board at a time, but she eventually reached the opposite side. Kana stood up and looked back at the bridge. After surviving the crossing, she briefly forgot how frightened she had been. She rose onto her hind legs, lifted her front claws in a victory pose, and proudly declared that the great red-winged lizard had conquered the bridge. She even claimed that conquering the world would be next. That confidence disappeared the moment she turned toward the temple. The huge, ancient structure waited in front of her, and Kana immediately began to shiver. She admitted that her talk about conquering the world had been a lie because she did not think she could enter that place. Then she slowly backed away. Her tail touched the bridge and a sharp cracking sound came from behind her. Kana turned around and saw the wooden structure beginning to collapse. The bridge she had just spent 30 minutes crossing broke apart, its boards crumbling into splinters before dropping into the black abyss below. She watched until every piece vanished from sight. Now there was no route back, the slope could not be climbed and the bridge had been destroyed. Whatever happened next, Kana was trapped on the temple's side of the cavern. She turned toward the temple and felt as though it was laughing at her predicament. The possibility that the temple had drawn her here suddenly seemed stronger to her. Kana blamed it for everything: the sweet-smelling fruit that had lured her in, the fall down the slope, the painful collision with the rock, and the dangerous bridge crossing. She knew some of those disasters had been her own fault, but blaming the temple made her feel better. Finally, she stopped retreating and pointed one claw at the ancient structure. If it wanted her to come inside so badly, she would do exactly that. After letting out a loud roar that echoed across the cavern, Kana puffed out her chest and charged onto the temple grounds. Kana's courage lasted only until she reached the temple's enormous doors. Standing beneath them, she looked up and realized the entrance was tens of times taller than the tallest human. The structure was already intimidating from a distance, but up close, its size made her feel even smaller. The columns surrounding the entrance were covered in strange carvings. Similar images appeared across parts of the temple walls, showing different creatures Kana had never seen before. Her knowledge of this world was still extremely limited, but even she could tell these beings were not ordinary animals from Earth. Kana tried to encourage herself as she stepped forward. The temple was creepy, the carvings were unfamiliar, and the darkness beyond the doors looked dangerous, but she had already come this far. She took another step and entered completely. The moment her entire body crossed the threshold, the room suddenly filled with an eerie blue light. The sudden glow made Kana shiver from head to toe. Whatever confidence she had forced herself to gather disappeared immediately. She decided that falling back into the abyss might be safer than staying inside. Kana spun around and sprinted toward the entrance, but she never made it through. Her body slammed into an invisible barrier where the doorway had been. The impact left her stunned. She had expected the temple to be dangerous, but she had not expected it to lock her inside. Kana complained that the world seemed determined to make everything go wrong for her, then tried to understand what had stopped her. The barrier could not be seen, but it was solid enough to send her bouncing back. Before she could try anything else, a calm female voice suddenly spoke from somewhere in the temple. The voice pointed out that Kana seemed to talk to herself often. That observation frightened her even more because she had not seen anyone nearby. Kana immediately assumed the speaker was a ghost. She curled into a ball and used her tail to cover her eyes. When the woman tried to reassure her, Kana began frantically listing every reason she would be a terrible meal. She insisted that her small lizard body was stringy, that she would cause heartburn, and that even a rock had recently been stuck in an embarrassing place. She even admitted that she had wet herself a little. Kana continued rambling until the woman finally shouted that she had no intention of eating or harming her. The force of the woman's voice sounded like thunder, and it stopped Kana instantly. With tears still in her eyes, Kana slowly peeked out from behind her tail. That was when she finally saw the speaker. A beautiful woman stood in front of her, looking mostly human except for the long tail and the horns growing from her head. Her horns, tail scales, and waist-length hair were all black, while her skin was snow white and her long dress was completely white as well. But there was one obvious problem: the woman was semi-transparent. Kana recognized the sight immediately and panicked again. To her, the woman was still a ghost. The woman became increasingly frustrated and asked whether Kana had ever even seen a ghost before. Kana admitted that she had not. That forced her to reconsider her assumption. The woman's smile and gentle aura did not resemble the terrifying creature Kana had imagined. Kana apologized, though she remained cautious. Her distrust came from her previous life as an orphan, when a woman who acted kind had nearly sold her to an old man. So even this ghost's friendly behavior was not enough to make Kana relax completely. The woman introduced herself as Lyserth and swore by the dragon goddess Rilnias that she would never hurt Kana. She explained that she wanted to help her. Lyserth then revealed that dragons were nearly extinct and Kana might be the last of their kind. Kana could not understand what she meant. As far as she knew, she was only a small red, winged lizard. Lyserth explained that the temple would admit only a 100% pure-blooded dragon, and its barrier had allowed Kana inside. Then she gave Kana the truth she had never considered. Kana was not a lizard at all, she was a pure-blooded baby dragon. Kana tried to dismiss the revelation as a joke. She argued that she was far too small to be a dragon and looked more like a red, winged lizard. Lyserth calmly corrected her. The temple would never respond to anything outside the dragon race, and its barrier required a 100% pure-blooded dragon to enter. That left Kana with another problem. If she and Lyserth were the same kind, why did Lyserth look mostly human while Kana still had a completely draconic body? After thinking it over, Kana awkwardly asked whether Lyserth had one human parent and one dragon parent. She even started wondering how that kind of relationship could work, then shivered at the thought. Lyserth stared at her in stunned silence before bursting out laughing. Both of her parents had been dragons. Her humanoid appearance was not the result of mixed blood at all. It was the result of evolution. That explanation immediately made Kana curious. She wanted to know how a dragon could evolve into a humanoid form, but Lyserth focused on something more important. She asked whether Kana had a system. Kana had heard of systems from the stories she remembered reading before. In those stories, reincarnated characters could call up their status, check their abilities, and grow stronger by leveling up. She had tried saying status earlier, but nothing had appeared, so she admitted that she did not know whether she had a system. Lyserth found this extremely strange. According to her, every creature in the world, even the smallest insects, was born with a system. It was not something only special people received. A system was supposed to be a natural part of every living creature. Kana was the exception. Lyserth briefly suspected that the gods might have somehow overlooked her. Then another question occurred to her. If Kana was a baby dragon, where were her parents? Kana's wings were not developed enough for her to fly, so she could not have reached the mountain temple by herself. When Lyserth asked, Kana said she had no parents. She claimed that she had woken up that very day on a ledge high on the mountain, making it her first day in this world. Kana deliberately kept the truth about her reincarnation hidden. She was worried that Lyserth might stop helping her if she learned that Kana had come from another world. Kana also still had many questions about this unfamiliar place, so revealing everything seemed too risky. Lyserth studied her with a complicated expression. She had never heard of a dragon appearing without being born from other dragons. Since Kana had somehow reached the temple without being able to fly, Lyserth began considering an extraordinary possibility. Perhaps one of the gods had created Kana directly and given the dragon race another chance. With dragons nearly extinct, Lyserth concluded that Kana was a miracle child and possibly the last hope of their kind. But there was still one serious flaw. Kana had no system, and without one, she would never be able to grow or evolve. Kana immediately asked whether that meant she would remain small forever. She did like being small, but she also wanted to become larger. More than that, she wanted to reach a humanoid form like Lyserth's, complete with horns and a tail. To Kana, that sounded incredibly cool. Lyserth assured her that the problem could be fixed. However, the solution required a sacrifice. Lyserth would have to travel with Kana by merging into her body. She would lose her current form and remain inside Kana until Kana became strong enough for her to manifest again using part of Kana's mana. Until then, Lyserth would only be able to communicate through a telepathic link. Kana did not hear this as an explanation of help. She heard it as a ghost describing how it planned to possess and eat her. She slowly backed away from Lyserth and pressed herself against the barrier near the temple entrance. In Kana's mind, the entire conversation had been a trap. Lyserth had gained her trust, waited for the right moment, and was now preparing to consume her. Kana curled into a ball and began shaking, convinced that she was too young to be eaten by a ghost. Lyserth could only sigh and rub her temples. She reminded Kana that she had already said she would not eat her, then reached out to pat her head. Kana immediately screamed that a perverted ghost was trying to eat her and resisted the proposed merge. Lyserth finally stopped arguing and took matters into her own hands. She made several strange movements with her fingers, then transformed into a small ball of light. Before Kana could react, the light shot straight toward the space between her brows and vanished into her body. Kana had kept her eyes tightly shut, so she did not even realize what had happened. Lyserth then calmly told her that it was over and that she could open her eyes. Kana slowly opened one eye. The ghost was gone from in front of her, and that allowed her to relax slightly. But Lyserth's voice was still there, which only created a new problem. When Kana asked where she was, Lyserth explained that she had merged into her and now technically existed as part of her. Because of that connection, they could communicate directly through their minds. Kana immediately panicked again and assumed she had been possessed. She even blamed the god who had sent her to this world, convinced that she had been delivered to a perverted ghost that planned to eat her from the inside. Lyserth quickly interrupted the rant and told her to test her mobility instead. If Kana could still control every part of her body, then she had not been possessed. Kana cautiously moved her hind legs, front legs, tail, and wings. She even shook her tiny dragon body several times to check for anything unusual. Once she confirmed that everything still responded normally, she had to admit that Lyserth had not taken control of her. Lyserth then asked for her name. Kana introduced herself, still feeling strange about having a voice inside her head. At the same time, she was quietly relieved. In her previous life, she had spent most of her time alone, talking only to herself. Now, for the first time, someone could actually answer her. Lyserth promised that she would never hurt Kana. She said that after everything she had experienced in life, she only wanted to help Kana grow and survive. Then she asked whether Kana had parents or anyone else in this new world who could guide her. Kana admitted that she was alone. That answer brought back memories of her former life on Earth. Her mother had died when Kana was only 7 years old. After that, she had been thrown out of her home and forced to survive on the streets without anyone to protect her. For 3 days, she went without food, wandering until hunger drove her to search through a dumpster. She found a piece of moldy bread and ate it immediately, only to discover that even the dumpsters were divided between different street territories. The dumpster belonged to someone else, and Kana was beaten badly for taking food from it. That experience taught her how dangerous the streets were. From then on, she began stealing from corner stores. At first, she took small things like candy. Later, as she became more desperate and more willing to take risks, she started stealing entire sandwiches and pre-made subs. She was caught many times. Other people also stole food from her whenever they had the chance. Still, Kana continued running, hiding, and taking whatever she needed to stay alive. For nearly 10 years, that was her entire life. Some days, she went 3 or 4 days without eating. The only reliable resources she had were public water fountains and restrooms. She eventually made one restroom near a police station her makeshift home. Her naturally frightened personality helped her avoid places that seemed especially dangerous, although it also made her terrified of staying in the park bathrooms after the power was shut off at night. That fear had been made worse by a horror book she once found in the trash. One of its stories involved a ghost named Hanako, and Kana never fully recovered from it. Even in the darkness of an empty bathroom, she worried that a ghost might appear and eat her. Now, after Lyserth reminded her of her situation, Kana realized that she was alone in this world too. The difference was that she no longer had to remain completely alone. Lyserth was inside her, and even without a physical body, she was someone Kana could speak with. More importantly, Lyserth seemed willing to teach her how this unfamiliar world worked. Kana cautiously asked if Lyserth truly meant to help her. Lyserth swore by the dragon goddess Rilnias that she had no intention of harming Kana. She explained that Kana might be the last surviving member of her kind, and Lyserth could not bear to watch her race disappear after suffering such a cruel fate. Her help would involve more than simple advice. Because Lyserth now resided inside Kana, she could help Kana grow as quickly as possible while granting her access to a special kind of system. Kana would still be able to level up and evolve normally, following basic paths such as becoming a fire dragon or a water dragon. However, the special system would allow her to collect multiple attributes and combine them with an even rarer special attribute. If Kana succeeded in gathering the right combination, she could forge an entirely new evolution line instead of following an ordinary dragon path. Those advanced paths were extremely difficult to achieve and would require much more work. But if Kana managed to complete one, her later forms could become higher-tier dragons with power that approached the level of the gods. Every evolution choice would affect her eventual strength and determine which special attributes she needed to obtain. Lyserth made it clear that the decision still belonged to Kana. Kana could choose the easier route or struggle toward one of the rare paths. After hearing the offer, Kana accepted Lyserth's help. Kana was not especially concerned with becoming powerful, but the possibility of evolving into a much cooler-looking dragon made the extra effort seem worthwhile. She asked Lyserth how to access the system. Lyserth gave her an elaborate set of instructions. Stand on one leg, hold her tail with her left front paw, point her right index claw toward the sky, spin around 3 times, strike a cat pose, and announce, "I, the great Kana, command you to open my status menu meow." Lyserth was only teasing her, expecting Kana to realize the ritual was ridiculous and complain. Instead, Kana followed every instruction exactly. She balanced on one leg, held her tail, pointed her claw upward, spun around 3 times, curled her paws in front of her, arched her back, and finished with the command. Lyserth immediately called the sight cute. Kana's already red scales became even redder and she realized she had been tricked. She wanted to hide in a hole from the embarrassment. Lyserth admitted she had been messing with her because Kana was too cute, but claimed the status menu portion had been genuine. Kana collapsed onto the floor, stared at the temple ceiling, and wondered if she had really allowed a demon into her body. Then she simply said, "Status." A semi-transparent blue window appeared in front of her. Nagano Kane. Race *dragon. Evolve type *dragon baby. Level asterisk 110. HP 500. MP 300. Attack power asterisk 400. Magic power asterisk 350. Intelligence asterisk 35. Vitality asterisk 50. Mind asterisk 30. Agility asterisk 10. Defense asterisk 100. Lyserth explained that the status window displayed everything Kana needed to know about her current condition. The level showed 1 out of 10, meaning Kana had to reach level 10 before she could select her next evolution path. At the bottom of the window were 3 icons. A book was active, while a magic circle and an egg-shaped icon were grayed out and unavailable. Kana touched the book, opening the skills menu. Her starting abilities were asterisk baby breath asterisk tail whip asterisk claw asterisk and bite asterisk. Baby breath allowed her to spit a small stream of fire with damage based on her magic power. Tail whip let her strike an opponent with her tail using her attack power. Claw and bite were similarly basic physical attacks, also based on attack power. Lyserth explained that these were the ordinary abilities a baby dragon possessed from birth. Kana barely listened before bursting out in disappointment. She had expected impressive magic spells, but instead she had received what sounded like nothing more than fire breath, a tail attack, claws, and teeth. Her frustration focused especially on baby breath. Kana wondered whether it meant breathing on enemies with bad breath rather than unleashing a proper spell. Then she sat down, stretched out her hind legs, dropped her front paws to her sides, and began crying. Lyserth was caught off guard and asked why she was suddenly upset. Kana answered through her tears that she wanted cool spells. That reaction made Lyserth explain the system more clearly. Every creature had to begin with basic abilities, and some species started with no skills at all. Once a creature reached the maximum level of its current form, it could evolve. During that process, it could choose an attribute and begin learning a school of magic. The powerful spells Kana wanted would only become available after she leveled up and evolved. Kana immediately stopped crying and asked whether she could eventually cast a spell with a dramatic name like Burning Raging Thunder Sphere. Lyserth agreed, although her answer was clearly meant to calm Kana rather than confirm that exact spell existed. That was enough. Kana sprang back to her feet, declared that they should go level up, and struck the same cat pose before meowing. Lyserth could only wonder whether Kana had actually started enjoying the pose. More importantly, Kana now had a clear goal: reach level 10 and unlock the stronger magic and evolution choices waiting beyond her current dragon baby form. Once Kana calmed down, she realized there was a problem. The path on the other side of the temple did not lead to an exit. The only route she had used to enter was now blocked, leaving her trapped inside. She asked Lyserth how they were supposed to leave. Looking around properly for the first time, Kana noticed that the room was filled with dragon statues. In the center stood a life-sized stone dragon with an imprint shaped like a paw. Lyserth told her to place her paw into it and recite an absurd phrase about sparkling, looking pretty, shaking her booty, and coming for someone before ordering the door to open. Kana immediately sensed that something was wrong, but she could not tell whether Lyserth was joking again, so reluctantly she repeated the entire phrase. A sharp snort came from Lyserth. Kana instantly realized she had been tricked. Before she could complain further, the temple began to rumble. Parts of the central dragon statue broke apart into neat, cube-shaped pieces. Each piece glowed blue before moving into position, forming a staircase that descended into a pitch-black abyss. The transformation took several minutes. When it was finished, Kana looked over the edge and shuddered. To her, the staircase looked like a path straight into a haunted underworld where ghosts were waiting to devour her. Lyserth pointed out that Kana would eventually need to fight creatures far more frightening than ghosts if she wanted to level up and unlock powerful spells. That argument was enough to push Kana forward. After shouting an insult into the darkness, she charged down the stairs. The darkness did not last. As soon as Kana entered the passage, glowing sections appeared along the walls and illuminated the route ahead. Kana complained that Lyserth could have mentioned this before sending her into the abyss. Lyserth admitted that she had not known whether the temple's ancient magic circles were still functioning. Some of them had survived, but others had failed, which explained the dark sections they passed along the way. The temple's systems were still working only in fragments after all this time. Kana continued down the long, winding staircase for several hours. She stopped more than once to rest, but the journey was made easier because she could keep talking with Lyserth. That conversation also reminded Kana how unusual her new situation was. In her previous life, she had rarely been able to speak with anyone for long. As a homeless orphan, she spent her days searching for food and her nights hiding in the women's restroom of a police station. Sometimes strangers gave her a few dollars or brought her a warm meal. Those small acts of kindness felt like blessings, even though no one could offer her anything beyond that. For a girl who had almost nothing, even one meal could make a major difference. Eventually, Kana reached the bottom of the stairs. Unfortunately, the passage ended at a solid wall of rock. She worried that the route had been sealed, but Lyserth explained that a teleportation circle should be somewhere on the floor. According to her, Kana only needed to stand on it and make several cute poses to activate it. Kana had already learned enough about Lyserth to recognize another trap. She searched for the circle while pointing out that standing on it should be sufficient. Lyserth clicked her tongue, accidentally confirming the lie. Kana realized that the earlier command had also been unnecessary. Lyserth then defended her obsession, claiming that cuteness could save souls, stop wars, heal wounds, and surpass even the gods. Kana refused to perform another cute pose and changed the subject by asking why Lyserth had been sealed in the temple. The answer revealed why Lyserth hated humans so deeply. She had been imprisoned as punishment for destroying a human kingdom and eating its king. Lyserth insisted she had only retaliated after a so-called hero declared that all demi-humans should die and attacked her with a sword. She claimed she had merely pinched him first, then launched into a furious rant about humans being filthy, multiplying like cockroaches. Kana quickly understood that she had opened a dangerous topic, but she also learned that the cute poses were not needed. After searching through the dust, she finally found the magic circle and stepped onto it. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the circle activated on its own, and a flash of light engulfed Kana, transporting her out of the ancient temple. As the light faded, a warm breeze passed over Kana's face. She had arrived on a ruined stone platform surrounded by thick trees, dense plants, and the sounds of birds and other animals. After being trapped underground for so long, simply standing on solid ground felt like a major victory. Kana struck her victory pose and celebrated being alive, even though she believed she had nearly died several times since waking up in this world. Lyserth immediately warned her not to relax. This place was the Forgotten Forest, and powerful monsters lived throughout it. Kana became nervous and wondered whether she could cross the forest without dying. Lyserth reassured her that Kana was not being left completely unprotected. She was keeping the stronger monsters away and would help Kana fight or escape if one managed to approach. Lyserth also explained why protecting Kana mattered so much. She had merged with Kana's body and could no longer exist as a freely wandering soul. Until Kana became much stronger, Lyserth could not manifest properly either. If Kana died, Lyserth's soul would disappear with her. In other words, Kana was now keeping Lyserth alive just as much as Lyserth was protecting Kana. Because of that, Lyserth intended to guide Kana along the fastest route out of the forest. She also realized Kana had not eaten since arriving, so food became the first priority. Lyserth remembered a patch of rainbow fruit somewhere ahead. The fruit was common in that area and supposedly very sweet, although she had not visited the forest for several thousand years and could not guarantee that the surroundings were still the same. The moment Kana heard the description, she remembered the fruit that had caused her trouble earlier. The egg-shaped fruit had different colors and a sweet smell, but Kana still considered it the fruit of the devil. Instead of accepting that she had simply failed to pick it before, she declared that she would get revenge by eating everyone she found. Lyserth did not understand the sudden declaration, but Kana charged toward the fruit patch anyway. Neither of them realized how much the forest had changed over the centuries. What had once been a small patch had grown into a massive, overgrown forest of rainbow fruit trees. Kana pushed through a bush and stopped in front of the enormous mass of colorful fruit. Her confidence disappeared when she saw how many there were. She awkwardly admitted that eating all of them might be difficult and decided to take only a few. Fortunately, the sheer weight of the fruit had pulled several branches low enough for her to reach. Kana grabbed one branch with both front paws and began pulling while stepping backward with her hind legs. She kept pulling harder, unaware that the branches had rubbery, elastic properties. The fruit could only be picked by breaking it from the stem. Pulling the branch instead stretched it farther and farther, turning it into a launch mechanism. Lyserth noticed what was happening and tried to warn her, but she was too late. The branch snapped back and hurled Kana through the air. For the first time, Kana experienced what it meant to fly, and immediately afterward what it meant to fall without a parachute. She flapped her useless wings as hard as possible, but they did nothing to slow her down. Kana could only panic as the ground rushed up beneath her. She crashed with a loud bang and landed far away from the fruit trees. At first, she only felt the pain in her head. Then, when she tried to stand, Kana noticed that the ground beneath her was soft and covered in fur. She slowly turned around and discovered that she had landed on a huge creature resembling a bear. This was no ordinary bear. It had 3 eyes and a horn protruded from its head. Worse, Kana was sitting directly on its stomach. Lyserth identified it as a 3-eyed horned bear and immediately told Kana that she had no chance of fighting it. The monster was far beyond her current ability. Kana tried to move carefully, but the bear's stomach shifted beneath her weight. Every movement made her lose balance. She slipped, dropped off its stomach, and landed on her backside. After rubbing the pain away, Kana briefly celebrated that she had avoided landing on any rocks. But before she could leave, she felt something watching her. Kana turned back and saw all three of the bear's eyes open, bloodshot and fixed on her. The monster's stare alone made its hostility unmistakable. Kana froze, then apologized before sprinting away as fast as her legs could carry her. Behind her, the three-eyed horned bear finally roared. Kana kept running through the forest with her tail tucked between her legs, but the three-eyed horned bear refused to stop chasing her. She could not understand why Lyserth's presence had failed to scare it away. Lyserth explained that the bear had been driven into a blind rage. Kana had crashed into it, stomped on its stomach, and left pawprints in its fur, so the powerful monster had ignored the usual fear caused by Lyserth's aura. But the bear was not the only problem. As Kana fled, more monsters joined the pursuit. She had already run through several nests while escaping, disturbing the creatures inside and crushing the eggs they had laid. Now, those monsters were chasing her as well, apparently seeking revenge for their destroyed offspring. Kana pointed out that one of the pursuers was a two-headed bee with 3 stingers, and it had even fired a lightning bolt at her. To her, that hardly looked like a weak enemy. Lyserth, however, insisted that the low-level monsters could not seriously hurt Kana individually. Even if the bee's lightning reached her, it should not cause any real damage. The bigger issue was that Kana had never properly checked her skills. She had only looked at their names, and the name Baby Breath had convinced her that the ability involved some kind of poisonous breath. Lyserth finally clarified the truth. The skill released flame, and it could instantly roast the low-level monsters chasing her. Kana immediately stopped running and turned around. With a new confidence, she opened her mouth and shouted, "Get a taste of my stinky baby breath." A wide cone of fire burst from her mouth. Every low-level monster caught in its range was incinerated instantly, leaving only ash behind. The spell worked so quickly that Kana could barely believe what she had done. She jumped onto her hind legs, struck a victory pose, placed her front paws on her hips, and proudly snorted at the defeated swarm. For a moment, it looked as if Kana had finally solved the problem. Then she heard the bear behind her. The three-eyed horned bear was still coming. Kana immediately abandoned her celebration and returned to running for her life. Lyserth told her to continue straight because they were almost outside the bear's territory. The bear had begun slowing down, suggesting they were nearing the boundary. For powerful monsters, entering another monster's territory was essentially an act of war, so Kana only needed to keep moving a little longer. That plan depended on the bear respecting the boundary. Instead, seeing the little dragon about to escape made it even more furious. The bear roared, reached toward the trees beside it, and ripped them out of the ground with their roots still attached. Then it hurled the trees at Kana. Kana screamed that the bear was cheating as she dodged from side to side. The forest gave it an almost endless supply of weapons, and every thrown tree crashed through the path behind her. She tried apologizing for slamming into the bear and stepping on its stomach, then desperately praised its beautiful fur and suggested that other bears must be lining up to marry it. The bear only roared louder. Lyserth explained that the monster was male, and Kana's attempt at praise had apparently touched on a sensitive subject. Kana was distracted by that revelation for only a second before 4 more trees flew over her head and smashed into the ground directly ahead. She tried to stop, but she had been running too fast. With no room to avoid the obstacle, Kana crashed into the trees and was knocked down in the middle of her escape. The impact knocked Kana down, but she had turned her body at the last moment and avoided taking the trees head-on. Even so, the collision left her hurting on the forest floor. She barely had time to recover before another shadow flew toward her. Kana tucked herself into a roll and the tree crashed down behind her. "Come on, give me a break with the damn trees already." The three-eyed horned bear still did not approach. Instead, it continued attacking from a distance, hurling trees in Kana's direction. Lyserth quickly realized why. The bear had stopped at the edge of its territory. Kana had escaped. Lyserth urged her to get farther away while the bear was still keeping its distance. Relieved, Kana stood up, turned around, and shook her rear toward the monster. She even slapped one cheek with her front paw before declaring, "You can't touch this booty." Then she stuck out her tongue. The bear answered with a furious roar. Kana's scales stood on end when the monster suddenly charged across the boundary. She immediately ran again, but this time the bear was chasing her instead of throwing trees. With its attention focused on catching her, Kana could at least sprint through the forest without having entire trunks launched at her. Lyserth could not believe Kana had ruined her own escape. She reminded her that all she had needed to do was keep running until she was out of the bear's throwing range. Kana complained that Lyserth had said the bear would not leave its territory. Normally, that rule would have protected her, but Kana's taunting had angered the bear so badly that it stopped caring about the boundary. The lesson was simple: provoking something much stronger than yourself could turn a safe escape into another chase. Kana kept running with her tail tucked between her legs, begging the bear to stop. She jumped over a bush, expecting to land on the ground beyond it. Instead, there was nothing beneath her. Kana dropped over a ledge and plunged into a river below. The splash was followed by frantic thrashing as she struggled to keep her head above the water. I almost died. Wait, how the hell do I swim? Lyserth told her to relax and paddle with both legs. Kana insisted that she was already using both of them, but the river's current had seized control of her body and was carrying her downstream. Lyserth then clarified that she needed to use her hind legs as well. Kana suddenly remembered that she had 4 legs. Once she began paddling with all 4, her body straightened into something like a doggy paddle. She still had no real swimming experience, but the instruction was enough to keep her afloat. Fighting against the current, Kana gradually made her way toward the bank and finally pulled herself onto shore. She lay on her back with all 4 legs spread out, staring at the treetops while water dripped from her scales. After escaping a bear and nearly drowning, Kana reached one conclusion. She was never shaking her butt at a bear again. Lyserth refined that rule. Kana should not shake her butt at anything stronger than her. The bear had finally been left behind, but the chase in the river had consumed most of Kana's energy. Her stomach was already rumbling. Since she had not eaten anything after arriving in this world, Lyserth suggested following the river until they found small prey. Kana soon spotted something unusual near the water, a bird with 3 legs and an enormous feathered tail. Lyserth identified it as a tri-footed pigeon. It could not fly, and its meat apparently tasted acceptable, making it a suitable first target for Kana to hunt. Lyserth had barely begun explaining that Kana should sneak closer when Kana burst out of the bushes instead. Die and become my dinner, you weird-looking chicken. The bird turned around without showing any fear. Rather than flee, it lunged straight at Kana and struck her. Kana yelped as the pigeon pecked and scratched at her, then tried to fight back with her front paws. She called one attack her lightning paw. When that failed to stop the bird, she followed with a supposed super hammer dropkick. The pigeon answered every move with more pecks and scratches, turning the hunt into a chaotic brawl on the ground. Kana and the tri-footed pigeon rolled through the dirt, one attacking with its beak and claws while the other punched and kicked with all 4 limbs. The bird was far tougher than Kana had expected, but she refused to give up while food was within reach. After the struggle, Kana finally overpowered the pigeon and subdued it. The tri-footed bird had become her potential meal and her first successful catch. Lyserth immediately took charge of turning Kana's catch into an actual meal. She warned Kana that not every prey animal would be foolish enough to attack its attacker, and bluntly pointed out that the tri-footed pigeon seemed to have as little common sense as Kana herself. Kana ignored the insult the moment she heard she was about to eat. Before preparing the bird, Lyserth had Kana look at her reflection in the nearby water. Kana studied her small red body, short snout, chubby cheeks, black horns, and reddish-golden eyes, then decided that she was pretty cute. Lyserth found that innocent confidence amusing, but quickly redirected her attention to the food. She explained that Kana needed to use her claws to strip the feathers away, dragging them from the bird's neck toward the base of its tail. If Kana wanted to eat the head, she had to remove the feathers there as well. Kana followed every instruction carefully, learning how to prepare the pigeon one step at a time. Lyserth then gave her a choice. Kana could roast the bird with all of its organs still inside, or remove the organs and throw them away. Removing them would make the meal cleaner, but it would also waste a large amount of nutrients. Since Kana had no intention of wasting food, she decided to cook the pigeon whole. To make the fire, Lyserth had Kana gather branches and use a small burst of her baby breath. They then found 2 branches with forked, V-shaped ends and placed them on either side of the fire. After pushing a long stick through the bird, they set it over the flames and began roasting it. Kana was already drooling while they worked. Nearly an hour passed before the pigeon was finally ready, but the wait only made her hunger more obvious. When Lyserth allowed her to eat, Kana held the entire roasted bird in her paws and took her first bite of fresh food. The juices filled her mouth, and Kana's reaction showed how much the meal meant to her. She ate slowly at first, not because she had to, but because she wanted to savor every bite. Even when her stomach began to feel full, she kept going. Her past life had taught her that food could disappear at any moment, so leaving anything behind felt impossible. Kana ate everything from the pigeon's head to its tail. She even swallowed the bones, leaving absolutely nothing behind. Once the entire bird was gone, she lay on her back, patted her full stomach, and released a satisfied burp. Lyserth had remained quiet during the meal so Kana could enjoy it, but now she asked whether it had been good. Kana answered through tears, calling it the best meal she had ever eaten. The full stomach reminded her of all the times in her previous life when she had wished for enough food to eat. When Lyserth noticed her crying, she became concerned. Kana quickly explained that she was grateful for being taught how to cook the bird. Before Lyserth intervened, Kana had been ready to eat it raw, feathers and all. Waiting had been difficult, but the result convinced her that Lyserth's lesson was worth it. Lyserth told Kana that they were a team and that helping each other was only natural. In her view, Kana was a good girl, even if she lacked common sense and regularly acted without thinking. Kana grew drowsy while listening. She mumbled that Lyserth was like a mother, then her eyes closed and she fell asleep. The words affected Lyserth more than she expected. She had never had children of her own, but raising Kana and teaching her how to survive was beginning to feel like a mother's responsibility. Being called Mom gave her an unfamiliar warmth, and she found that she did not dislike the idea of Kana being her daughter. Still, Lyserth decided that affection could not replace discipline. Once Kana woke up, she planned to begin strict training. The young dragon needed to learn common sense, survival skills, and how to handle dangerous situations before her reckless behavior caused a real disaster. While Kana rested, 5 teenage adventurers arrived at the entrance of the forest. They were all around 16 or 17 years old, but their equipment showed that each member had a different role. Thane, one of the boys, carried a sword and shield beneath heavy armor, making him the group's obvious frontline fighter. Ray wore light leather armor and had a broadsword strapped across his back. Seely, a girl with a bow and quiver, wore leather armor. Ren carried a staff and wore robes beneath a wide-brimmed hat with a tall, pointed tip. The final member was Isabella, a girl in white robes who held a book and looked like she belonged to a church. Seely asked Ray whether they were really prepared to handle their quest. Ray responded confidently that they could succeed as long as they stayed careful. With Thane leading and Ray keeping additional enemies away from the others, he believed their formation was strong enough. He also told Seely that she worried too much, smiling as though his confidence alone should settle the matter. Seely was not impressed. She told him to save the confidence for when he actually started pulling his weight, adding that his smile was the only thing he had going for him. With Kana asleep under Lyserth's care and the human party stepping into the forest for their herb quest, 2 very different groups had begun moving through the same dangerous territory. The adventure party did not waste time making Ray feel worse. Ren joined Celia mocking him, pointing out that his looks were apparently the only thing above average about him. She even brought up a past incident that Ray clearly wished everyone would forget. According to Ren, he had made a serious mistake, though she had managed to keep herself intact before he could do anything. Ray lowered his head and clutched his chest as if every word had physically stabbed him. Isabella finished the attack by reminding everyone about Ray's recent fight with a tri-footed pigeon. He had been beaten by the bird, failed to stop it from escaping, and then needed healing afterward. To Isabella, the sword on his back only made the story more embarrassing, since Ray had chosen to fight the bird with his fists instead. She was so disgusted by the memory that she spat on the ground and said she did not even want to heal him again. By the end of the exchange, Ray was kneeling with his arms hanging at his sides, looking completely defeated. Thane finally stepped in before the others could destroy what remained of his pride. He reminded the women that the party still needed Ray to distract additional monsters, even if he could not contribute much beyond that. With the argument over, Thane gave the group its instructions. Their quest was to find herbs that only grew in the middle section of the forest, so everyone needed to stay alert and conserve mana. The party then entered the forest to begin searching. The next morning, Lyserth started Kana's common sense training. Kana was still below level 2, and Lyserth warned her that she could not keep relying on luck after surviving the 3-eyed horned bear. The next dangerous situation might not let her escape so easily. From that point forward, Lyserth planned to help her level up while teaching her to think before acting. Kana immediately demonstrated why that training was necessary. She had noticed a large pink flower with a pleasant smell and leaned in to sniff it. The flower suddenly closed its petals around her head and refused to let go. Kana thrashed on the ground, shouting that it was stuck to her face, while Lyserth told her to release a little fire. Once Kana burned the flower enough to make it let go, Lyserth explained what had nearly eaten her. The plant was called a follow-me flower. Its sweet nectar attracted birds and other animals, allowing it to capture them and slowly digest its prey. Kana shivered when she realized she had almost become food for a plant. After that close call, Lyserth explained the plan for Kana's growth. Kana would spend part of the day fighting monsters and work toward level 3. Whenever she leveled up, she would gain status points that could be assigned to strength, intelligence, vitality, mind, or agility. For her first 2 levels, Lyserth wanted every point placed into agility so Kana could move faster and dodge more effectively. Kana's other base stats were already higher than normal, so Lyserth considered them sufficient until level 10. After the first 2 levels, Kana would save her points for evolution. Evolution required specific stats in an attribute, but it would also greatly increase her other abilities. Lyserth then encouraged Kana to choose a special evolution, warning that it would demand extra effort but could allow her to learn the cool spells she wanted. Kana agreed without hesitation. If working harder meant gaining those spells, she was willing to do it. She also wanted to reach a humanoid form so she could explore the world more easily. Since it was still early and Kana had not eaten yet, Lyserth decided to begin with a basic survival lesson, fishing. Kana's eyes widened at the mention of food, and her training began with learning how to catch her own meal. Kana's first fishing lesson quickly showed the limits of improvisation. Lyserth had tied a long blade of grass to Kana's tail and attached a strange bug to the other end. It was hardly proper fishing equipment, but with nothing better available, Lyserth instructed Kana to dip the bait into the river and wait for a sharp tug. When she felt one, she was supposed to pull the line up and swing her tail toward the shore. Kana followed the instructions and waited beside the river. She waited so long that she was almost ready to give up. Then, after nearly 20 minutes, something suddenly tugged hard on her tail. Kana reacted immediately, swinging the grass toward land with excited anticipation. But there was no fish waiting for her. The bug had disappeared, and half the blade of grass had been eaten away. The improvised method had failed because there was no hook to hold the fish. Lyserth explained that catching fish this way would require a great deal of practice, especially since even she had needed almost a year to catch one reliably when she first learned. They could continue practicing every morning, but for now, Kana needed another way to get breakfast. Fishing without the right equipment had been a poor plan, so Lyserth led Kana into the forest to search for smaller prey. This time, the lesson focused on movement. Kana had to walk silently and avoid disturbing anything before she got close enough to attack. After only a few minutes, they found a six-legged deer with two puffy tails. Lyserth pointed out that the creature was valuable food because its meat tasted good whether cooked or eaten raw. However, six-legged deer were difficult to catch, so Kana had to stay low and approach without making a sound. Kana pressed her body against the ground and began stalking it from behind. As she moved closer, Lyserth watched her position and told her when to prepare. Kana kept her front half low, raised her rear slightly, and curled her tail over her back. Her excitement made her dragon body sway from side to side, but the deer still failed to notice her. Then Lyserth gave the signal. Kana launched herself forward so quickly that her attack became a blur. She tackled the deer, and when it cried out, she used her first hunting skill, bite. Her teeth sank into its body and clamped down as blood filled her mouth. Instead of hesitating, Kana followed with claw. Her claws struck the deer's neck with enough force to nearly sever its head. Kana had successfully hunted the valuable deer through stealth and a sudden ambush. Proud of her first attempt, she celebrated while Lyserth praised her. They then carried the carcass back toward the riverside camp, where Kana could prepare it the same way she had prepared the bird. By the time they returned, Kana had secured her breakfast. Elsewhere in the forest, Thane was holding off 5 two-headed wolves when the party stumbled into a separate fight between 2 wolves and 4 twin-stinger bees. The moment the monsters noticed the humans, they abandoned their original battle and turned on the adventurers instead. Thane ordered Ray to keep the bees away from the women, but Ray was struggling. Seely fired 4 arrows in succession while insulting him, and Ren joined in by teasing that Seely's constant attacks made it sound like she liked Ray. Seely immediately denied it, saying she would rather sleep with a demi-human than him. Thane told them to stop arguing and focus, but before the fight could settle, Isabella noticed something much worse approaching. A massive 3-eyed horned bear had reached the area, its 3 eyes bloodshot and its temper clearly out of control. Ray recognized the paw prints on the bear's stomach and questioned what it was doing so close to the forest's edge. Those prints still belonged to Kana, and mentioning them only enraged the monster further. With the bear now bearing down on them, Thane smashed the wolves aside and ordered everyone to run deeper into the forest. That escape forced the adventurers toward Kana's area. Nearby, Kana happily devoured her 6-legged deer, completely unaware that danger and a group of humans was closing in. After Kana finished skinning the deer, Lyserth came up with a practical use for the hide. If they left it in the sun to dry, they could turn it into simple bedding, using the deer feathers from the previous day to make a pillow. Kana immediately became excited. She remembered how soft pillows had been before her mother died, especially compared to the cold walls of the public restroom where she had once slept. When she asked how long it would take, Lyserth estimated that it could be ready that very night. Kana placed the meat down long enough to move the hide into a sunny spot, then went straight back to eating. Lyserth used that opportunity to teach her about the world. The world was called Zeneria, and it had almost 7 continents. Kana was currently on Munas. Cryon was controlled by elves, and travel there was strictly regulated. Figrakari was ruled by the Fae and had similar restrictions. Yukavuran and Ayabunesh were mixed-race continents, while Klipperhorn and Plekoth were uncharted. They were known to exist, but strange occurrences made reaching them nearly impossible. Zeneria was home to many different races. Humans made up around 30% of the population. Elves were proud and looked down on other races, though their leather and woodcraft were unmatched. Dwarves were famous for making weapons and armor, and they were the most advanced race when it came to magical technology. The beastmen included many animal-based races, although they generally looked more human than animal, retaining features such as ears and tails. Lizardmen were intelligent humanoids with lizard-like appearances, and usually lived in swamp regions. The Fae included beings such as fairies and dryads and were mainly found on Figurkari. Mermen lived in the oceans and hated surface dwellers, while the insectoids were sentient insect monsters that remained with the nests where they had been born. Then Lyserth explained the dragons. They were believed to be extinct and now appeared only in stories. Long ago they had ruled the world and were considered its strongest beings, but no one knew what had caused their disappearance. Lyserth had merely watched fewer and fewer dragons pass through the temple over the years. Eventually none came at all. Because of that, Kana was likely the last dragon alive. Lyserth then focused on Munas, the continent where they were staying. Humans controlled most of it, but dwarves and beastmen also possessed powerful kingdoms. Munas had 6 countries: the Bodis Empire, the Eusaris Kingdom, the Illyrian Kingdom, the Euthia Theocracy, the Stonehammer Kingdom, and the Rural Kingdom. The first 4 belonged to humans. The Stonehammer Kingdom was hidden in a vast mountain range and belonged to the dwarves, while the beastmen ruled the Rural Kingdom. Kana was living in the Forgotten Forest on the eastern side of the Illyrian Kingdom. It was a small country, but it maintained a strong army. When Lyserth finally asked whether Kana understood, Kana looked up with her cheeks packed full of deer meat. She had missed almost the entire lesson. Lyserth had to repeat everything, making certain Kana paid attention this time. Most importantly, Lyserth warned her about humans. In her view, they were dangerous and would manipulate others to get what they wanted. If Kana encountered one, she needed to either kill it or flee immediately. Kana accepted the warning. She already distrusted humans because of her past. While she knew not every human was necessarily bad, the people she had met on the streets had mostly been cruel. Once after taking food, she had been beaten badly enough to break 2 ribs, yet still had to search through trash for something to eat. She had survived, but the memory left her believing that death might have been easier. So when Lyserth told her to kill humans or run, Kana had no reason to argue. Ray's party had expected to escape the 3-eyed horned bear, but the situation kept getting worse. The bear was still chasing them, and the wolves and bees they had been fighting earlier had joined the pursuit. Every monster they passed seemed to be added to the growing stampede behind them. Ray could only panic and ask what was wrong with the bear. Seely suggested throwing him at it so the others could get away, but nobody seriously stopped running. Isabella, the party's priestess, was already sweating heavily and struggling to breathe. She complained that priests were not meant to run for this long, but stopping would leave her exposed to the monsters. When Isabella began falling behind, Thane ran back and carried her. He soon picked up Ren as well, relying on his exceptionally high strength to carry both girls while continuing to flee. Seely noticed that she was the only girl still keeping pace and sarcastically complained about being left behind. Thane pointed out that she could ask Ray to carry her, but Seely rejected that idea immediately, saying she would rather jump into the bear's mouth because it was cuter than Ray. Elsewhere, Kana had found 2 two-headed wolves while searching for monsters to kill and gain real combat practice. Lyserth had restricted her from using baby breath, forcing her to fight with physical attacks instead. Kana had initially wanted to run, but Lyserth's warning pushed her to stay and face them. Once the battle began, Kana started enjoying herself. She slammed her tail into one wolf with tail whip, sending it spinning, then avoided the other wolf's claws and struck back with claw. Rather than finishing them, she kept knocking the wolves around and even celebrated while shaking her tail. Lyserth realized Kana was treating the fight like a game. If the wolves escaped, all that training would earn her nothing, so she ordered Kana to stop playing and kill them. Kana accepted the command and used bite twice in succession, clamping down on both wolves' throats. She showed no hesitation. To Kana, anything that attacked her was food, and both wolves were defeated. A loud ding suddenly rang out, and Kana immediately asked Lyserth what it meant. Lyserth explained that the sound signaled a level up and told her to open her status screen. Kana's status now showed that she had reached level 2 as a dragon baby, with her first evolution still requiring 10 levels in total. She had also received 5 status points, though Kana thought that seemed like very little. Lyserth explained that this was the normal amount before evolution. Each level would provide 5 points, but after Kana evolved, that reward would increase to 10 points. However, the required levels would double as well. Her first evolution needed 10 levels, while the next one would require 20. The reason for this system was unknown, although Lyserth suspected the gods had designed it to prevent lifeforms from reaching godhood too easily. Kana did not mind the long process. She was determined to keep working until she could use impressive skills, and she also privately hoped to gain a humanoid form like Lyserth's. Lyserth then told her to put all 5 points into agility. After that, they would continue hunting until Kana reached level 3, then leave the forest and establish a base near water. Kana tapped the plus sign beside agility. Her 5 points dropped to 0 and agility increased from 10 to 15. She immediately felt lighter. With the allocation complete, Kana resumed hunting, promising not to play around anymore before giving Lyserth a cheerful salute. After several hours of hunting, Kana finally reached level 3. She invested her 5 status points into agility, raising it from 15 to 20. The boost would let her move much faster and improve her survivability. Lyserth was pleased, but warned that leveling would slow dramatically after level 5, possibly to only half a level per day. She still wanted a base outside the forest. Then Kana spotted something overhead. Kana looked up and noticed a shadow passing overhead. Before she could figure out what it was, a tree crashed into the ground with a tremendous boom. Her body immediately tensed. Kana recognized the direction it had come from, and her fear confirmed what she was already thinking. The three-eyed horned bear had returned. At that moment, Ray's fleeing party burst out of the bushes. Ray was running with Sally, Thane, Isabella, and Ren, and behind them came the massive bear, throwing trees as it chased them. The creature spotted Kana, recognized her, and immediately focused on her as another target. Lyserth warned Kana that she still was not strong enough to fight it. Kana needed no further explanation. She turned around, tucked her tail between her legs, and ran as fast as her improved agility allowed. The problem was that the humans were running in the same direction. Kana already disliked humans, and having them follow her while a monster chased them only made the situation worse. She shouted for them to stop chasing her and go away. Ray was stunned that the small lizard could speak. Thane confirmed that he had heard her clearly, while Seely joked that Kana was probably insulting Ray specifically because he was hated by every race, especially women. Kana had no interest in their conversation. She only wanted them out of her path. When the humans kept following, she used her tail to grab a rock and threw it backward without slowing down. The stone struck Ray in the shoulder. Seely began laughing at him, but Kana immediately hit her with another rock. Seely threatened to kill the oversized rat if she survived, while Ray laughed and admitted that he liked the lizard. Kana, however, still wanted nothing to do with them. The three-eyed horned bear and the entire human party continued pursuing her through the forest. Seely angrily told Ray that if she survived, she would send him 6 feet under. Thane ordered everyone to stop talking and focus on dodging, since Kana was still pelting the group with rocks while running. He could not understand how she managed to pick up and throw them so easily without slowing down. Isabella was struck directly on the rear and demanded to know who had hit her. Kana immediately mocked her, saying that with a rear that large it was not difficult to hit, then tossed another rock at her. Isabella had ended up in an awkward position after Thane lost his grip on her. As she fell, he caught her by the waist, leaving her facing the opposite direction. Before Kana could get much farther, another shadow passed overhead and crashed beside her. The bear had torn up and thrown yet another tree. Kana demanded to know why it kept throwing trees at them, but she knew the chase could not continue forever. She asked Lyserth if there was any way out. Lyserth suggested using the river. Kana's best chance was to jump back into the water and let the current carry her downstream. If they were lucky, it might take them out of the forest, although Lyserth could not guarantee it would work. Kana immediately turned toward the river and charged through the trees. Unfortunately, the humans followed her instead of escaping in another direction. She now had the three-eyed horned bear behind her and the entire human group close behind, so she wished the bear would simply eat them. When it roared in anger, Kana hurriedly changed her insult to beautiful bear. Lyserth warned her that they were almost at the river. Kana broke through a bush, held her breath, and jumped into the water instead of reaching for empty air like before. 5 more splashes followed as the humans jumped in after her. Kana surfaced and cursed them for following, while Seely angrily demanded that she come closer so she could use her bow. The bear remained on the bank rather than swimming, but it still refused to give up. It swiped at a nearby tree and sent the trunk flying toward Kana and the humans as they were carried downstream. Watching the bear continue beside the river, Kana realized this was not a normal pursuit. It was completely obsessed with killing her. Lyserth told Kana to swim toward the opposite shore. Staying in the river left them at a disadvantage because the current made it difficult to escape quickly, while crossing would force the three-eyed horned bear to search for her again. That delay might give Kana and Lyserth enough time to reach the forest's exit. Kana had no better option. She did not want to die again, and she certainly did not want to remain trapped in the river with the humans following behind her. She wondered if the god who had given her a second chance had decided to place both of the things she hated most in front of her at once. As Kana swam, she realized the humans were still coming after her. She angrily asked why they were following, but Seely shouted back that nobody would follow a dirty lizard. In reality, the group was deliberately staying behind Kana. They knew animals had better survival instincts than humans, and since this lizard seemed intelligent enough to find a way out, following her was their best chance of surviving. Kana could not do anything about them while she was struggling against the water, so she continued swimming. Then another enormous shadow passed overhead. A tree came crashing down in front of her, striking the river and sending a violent wave across the surface. Kana immediately held her breath, ducked underwater, and swam toward a sunken log. She wrapped her tail around it and held on while the wave passed. Her only concern was avoiding being swept back toward the bear's side of the river. The humans were on their own. Once the current settled, Lyserth told her it was safe to continue. Kana released the log and swam toward the opposite bank as quickly as she could. She finally hauled herself out of the river, gasping for breath, then looked back. The bear was still standing on the other side. Its bloodshot eyes remained fixed on Kana, and its killing intent had not weakened at all. She was too exhausted to mock it this time. Instead, she stood up, shook the water from her body, and ran into the woods while she still had enough strength to move. Several minutes later, 5 soaked figures struggled up onto the riverbank behind her. They collapsed onto the ground, panting and thanking whatever gods had allowed them to survive. Seelie had lost all of her usual energy and swore that if she ever saw Kana again, she would kill her. Thane admitted that he understood why Kana was angry. Their group had effectively trained the bear to focus on her, dragging it into the pursuit and making her the target of their escape. Ray, however, remained more concerned about the bear itself. Its determination seemed unnatural since it had chased them relentlessly despite the distance and the river. Rines suggested that it might simply have been hungry. The humans did not realize that the bear's rampage had nothing to do with hunger. They had unknowingly blamed its rage on an ordinary appetite, never suspecting that Kana was the real reason it refused to stop. Even so, Thane pointed out that they owed the lizard their lives. Kana had led them toward a path that allowed them to survive. Seelie still refused to forgive her and continued insisting that she would kill Kana if given the chance. Much farther downstream, Kana finally slowed and asked Lyserth whether they were heading in the right direction. Lyserth believed they were. Their immediate goal was simply to leave the forest, but she also apologized because they had lost the materials Kana needed to make her pillow. With the two of them now on the opposite side of the river and the bear remaining across the water, there was no safe way to go back for them. Fortunately, the three-eyed horned bear disliked water and could not easily cross the river. That was the only reason it had not followed Kana directly. Kana accepted the loss without complaint. She could make another pillow when they found suitable materials, and for now, her tail was comfortable enough. She also decided to stop recklessly investigating every strange thing she encountered. After nearly being eaten by a plant 3 times in one day, Kana had begun taking her training more seriously and listening closely to Lyserth's advice. She was still improving with every monster she fought, and she still enjoyed combat, but for the moment, she continued alone toward the forest's exit. As the sun began setting behind the mountain, orange light spread across the sky. Kana pushed through the last thicket and finally stepped out of the forest. Beyond the trees was a vast meadow covered in flowers of every color. The grass only reached Kana's knees and several small ponds glittered across the field. A river also emerged from the forest and cut through the meadow. Coming from a past life filled with city smog and brick buildings, Kana had never seen a landscape like this. The sight brought an immediate smile to her face, and even Lyserth admitted that the meadow was beautiful. They still needed 2 things before nightfall: water and food. Lyserth selected a pond to the left as their campsite, then pointed out several horned rabbits hopping through the flowers. The animals were much larger than ordinary rabbits, making them enough to serve as proper prey. Kana quickly gathered sticks and chose suitable pieces for roasting. She carried the firewood and cooking sticks to the pond, cleared a space near the shore, and arranged the campsite. Once the water and shelter location were secured, she focused on hunting. Lyserth warned her that horned rabbits were fast, so Kana needed to wait for the right moment and approach without making a sound. Kana understood that the closer she got before attacking, the better her chances would be. She had one natural advantage: she gave off no bloodlust or killing intent. Kana could hide her presence without even realizing she was doing it. The same ability had helped her hunt the 6-legged deer, and now it worked again. Before long, Kana had secured 4 horned rabbits. None of them noticed her until it was already too late. Lyserth was surprised by how naturally Kana concealed herself, possibly because of instincts developed during her time as a street rat. With water, firewood, and enough meat secured, Kana was ready to prepare rabbit dinner. With the rabbits secured, Kana began skinning them and preparing the meat. Horned rabbits were far larger than earth rabbits, closer to fat, medium-sized dogs, and the sight of all that meat made her saliva run like a waterfall. Then a voice came from behind. Kana turned and found 5 figures approaching, the same party she had hoped never to see again. She immediately dropped into a fighting stance. Seelie recognized her and angrily called her a damn lizard, even starting to threaten roasted lizard meat. She never finished. Kana's tail whip struck Seelie and sent her flying through the air. Seelie landed in the pond with a huge splash, while Kana spun once and struck her usual proud victory pose. The other 4 adventurers stood frozen. They had barely seen Kana move. One moment Seelie was shouting, and the next she was airborne. Thane, the most responsible member of the group, stepped forward and bowed his head. He apologized for what had happened earlier. Kana accepted the apology and told them not to repeat it. She did not mention that the three-eyed horned bear incident had largely started because of her own actions. More importantly, she did not feel threatened. Even if all five attacked together, Kana believed she could overpower them. Thane then admitted that their survival had depended on following Kana. If they had gone another way, one of them might have died, or the entire party might have been wiped out. Their escape had only been possible because of her. Lyserth still urged Kana to distrust humans, insisting they only apologized after taking advantage of someone and even suggesting that Kana burn them with baby breath. Kana considered it, but Thane's sincere apology changed her mind. She also recognized that the party had not known she was there and the bear likely would have followed her regardless. For now, the conflict ended in an uneasy truce at Kana's camp. Kana was ready to end the conversation and return to her roasted horned rabbit when Seely suddenly called after her. The soaked adventurer had finally made it back to shore, with water dripping from her clothes and her blonde hair hanging loose around her shoulders. Kana immediately pulled the roast closer and warned Seely not to touch it. Seely quickly clarified that she did not want Kana's food, she wanted to ask for Kana's help. Seely admitted that her team had accepted a guild quest that was beyond their current ability. They needed to spend the next few days traveling through the forest, where the monsters were stronger and more numerous than they could handle safely. After what had just happened, Seely understood that her group needed someone powerful with them. She bowed her head and asked Kana to assist them. In exchange, Seely promised that they would provide anything Kana requested, as long as they were capable of obtaining it. That offer caught Kana off guard, especially because Lyserth had spent so much time warning her not to trust humans. But Lyserth now saw a useful opportunity. She suggested that Kana bargain for a fishing rod with spare hooks along with a bag. The rod would let Kana catch fish for herself, while the bag would make it easier to carry supplies and other items. The moment Kana heard that fish could be part of the deal, she became willing to cooperate. She told Seely she would help, but only if the party fulfilled 2 requests. Kana then stated her price, a fishing rod with extra hooks in a bag. She delivered the demand with such a serious expression that Seely expected something far more expensive. Instead, the requested items were simple supplies the party already had access to. Seely agreed immediately, relieved that the negotiation had been so easy. Kana made it clear that those were the only terms. If Seely accepted, Kana would help them. If not, they could leave her alone so she could finish her meal. Kana had no intention of working for free, and the possibility of obtaining what she wanted did not change that. Seely gladly confirmed the agreement. She knew the trip into the forest would still be dangerous, and the party had already been worn down by the earlier battle. Even without the three-eyed horned bear chasing them, the other monsters had pushed them close to their limit. Kana's assistance could make the difference between completing the quest and being overwhelmed. Seely also asked whether Kana wanted anything else. The first requests had been so modest that she suspected Kana might be holding back. After thinking about it, Kana remembered 2 more useful items. She asked for a pillow and a blanket. Seely accepted those terms as well and immediately ordered Ray to run into town to obtain everything Kana had requested. Before she could finish calling Kana a lizard, Kana cut her off and firmly corrected her. "My name is Kana." She had grown tired of being identified as the lizard instead of being called by her actual name. Seely apologized and repeated the order, this time using Kana's name. Ray objected at once. Since Seely had made the deal, he argued that she should be the one to go. He even turned to Kana with a smile, apparently expecting her to agree with him. Instead, Kana threatened to hit him with her tail if he did not go. Ray was confused by the sudden hostility and asked what he had done. Kana gave him a blunt answer. His smile irritated her. With that threat hanging over him, Ray was sent to town to obtain Kana's fishing gear, bag, pillow, and blanket. Ray's smile cracked when Kana told him that his smile irritated her. He was used to being mocked by his teammates, but hearing the same insult from someone of another species hit him even harder. The situation became worse when the rest of the party started laughing. Thane, who usually tried to hold his laughter in, was nearly rolling on the ground. Seely walked over with a wide grin and slapped Ray hard on the back several times. She reminded him that every girl thought he was creepy, and that it apparently made no difference whether they were human or another species. Ray finally gave up arguing. Sulking, he called himself a creepy bastard, then said he would go to town rather than stay and let everyone keep picking on him. His shoulders dropped as he turned and walked away to get the supplies Kana had demanded. Thane tried to defend him, telling Seely that Ray meant well and only had problems dealing with women. but the attempt was undermined by the fact that he was still red-faced and laughing. Ren then stopped treating the issue as a joke. She told Thane that Ray's problems went beyond his behavior around women. In her view, he was also failing the team. During the earlier fight against the wolves and bees, Ray had struggled to handle the enemies. It was not an isolated incident either. On their previous quest, Isabella had been seriously injured because Ray could not keep the additional enemies away from her. Seely was constantly forced to run around while kiting enemies, and Ren had been dealing with the same burden. Their party was dysfunctional because everyone else knew how to fight while Ray spent more time trying to pick up women than training. He was lazy, and Ren said Thane knew exactly why the others had tolerated him. Thane's laughter stopped. He admitted that Ray's position as a noble's son was the real problem. Thane and Ray were friends, but Ray's family employed Thane's parents. If Thane removed Ray from the party, his parents could lose their jobs or even be accused of a crime they had not committed. Thane knew how Ray's father operated, so he was trapped by the pressure from that family. Turning against Ray would not only affect him, his parents would be the ones to suffer. That explanation settled the party's main conflict, but it also pushed Seely toward a decision she had already been considering. She announced that she would leave after the current quest. Ray had slowed her progress too much, and she would rather train alone than continue carrying his weakness. Ren and Isabella both asked if she was serious. Seely confirmed that she needed to refine her skills and throw herself back into training. She had not even evolved yet, and her progress had fallen badly since joining the team. Before that, she had gained roughly a quarter of a level each day. Now, she gained only a tenth of a level per quest. At 17, Seely was still just level 8 and remained an apprentice, while Ren had become a level 1 mage, Isabella a level 1 priestess, and Thane a level 2 shield knight. Seely was supposed to evolve into an archer, but tavern time and team quests had replaced the training she needed. After Kana knocked her into the pond, she finally recognized how much time she was wasting. Today's conflict became the final push. Once this quest ended, Seely would return to leveling alone, and the party began fracturing around Ray. Thane was disappointed that Seely was leaving. She had been one of the party's strongest members, and Isabella and Ren were just as depressed. Kana, however, expected the farewell to become much more dramatic. She asked when someone was going to slap somebody and stop Seely from leaving, as if the argument were entertainment. With no one starting a fight, Seely simply sat beside Kana and asked for some of her roasted rabbit. Kana immediately hugged the food to her chest and refused, calling Seely a stinking human. When Seely reached for a piece anyway, Kana smacked her hand with her tail. Seely shouted, and Kana swung her tail again while warning her to keep away from the food. Watching them bicker, Lyserth could only shake her head. Somehow, despite Kana's hatred of humans, she and Seely were already becoming close. That worried Lyserth more than the argument itself. Nearby, the humans remained camped with the uneasy party, and the group eventually settled down for the night, though Kana still guarded her rabbit. Kana was still wary of the group even after getting along with Seely. Before settling down, she quietly asked Lyserth whether the humans could be trusted. Kana felt that Seely might be different, but she had also noticed a certain indifference from the others. Even Seely had not earned her complete trust. Lyserth advised her to remain cautious. She believed Seely showed no obvious hostility, but Kana should keep a close eye on the rest of the party and on Seely as well. Lyserth had no reason to trust humans after everything that had happened to her. Still, she was willing to use them when necessary, just as Kana was cooperating with this party to obtain the fishing rod, hooks, bag, and bedding she needed. Lyserth also assured Kana that sleeping near the humans was safe. Since she was only a soul, she did not need to rest, and she could sense any hostile presence that approached. With that reassurance, Kana finally relaxed enough to sleep. The next morning, Kana woke as sunlight spread across the camp. She stretched her front legs, then her hind legs, and looked around. Most of the humans were still asleep, but Seely was already awake. A short dagger moved through the air as Seely practiced her swings a short distance away. Kana walked over and watched her for a moment before asking why she was practicing with a dagger when her main weapon was a bow. Seely explained that the bow was still her preferred weapon, but she planned to work alone after this quest. To survive as a solo adventurer, she needed to recover her dagger skills. Without knowing how to fight at close range, she believed she would die very quickly. That answer made Kana curious. She asked why Seely would choose work that could cost her life. Seely stopped practicing and sat beside her. After checking that the rest of the camp was still quiet, she explained that she had no other choice. She did not have a family anymore. They had been destroyed because a noble had become obsessed with her mother. Seely had been 12 at the time. The noble sent his men to her home to drag her mother away. Her parents hid Seely beneath the floorboards inside a trapdoor used to store food. From that hiding place, she heard the men arguing and heard her mother scream. then the smell of blood filled the small space. One of the men suggested that they play with Seely's mother first. She heard what followed, and it became a memory she wished she could erase. When the men finished, they laughed as they left the house and set it on fire. The flames spread quickly, forcing Seely out from beneath the floor. But when she reached the front room, she found her father's headless body lying in a pool of blood. She tried repeatedly to pull him outside, but at 12 years old, she was too weak to move him. As the heat became unbearable, she was forced to flee without him. Seely still did not know whether her mother was alive. The only information she had managed to gather was that a noble had taken her, supposedly because he had fallen in love with her. That uncertainty had remained with Seely ever since. She admitted that sometimes she wished she were not human. Before she could explain what she meant, Ren called out from behind them, interrupting the conversation. Kana watched Seely get up, then asked her one direct question: did she hate humans? For the first time, Seely gave Kana a genuine smile. Her answer was simple: if she had the power, she would kill them all. She patted Kana on the head and then went over to Ren. Kana stayed where she was, thinking about what she had heard. She already believed humans were greedy and selfish, but Seely's hatred came from the same kind of suffering Kana understood. The difference was that Seely had found a way to survive through the Adventurers Guild, while Kana's former world had offered her no such path. Kana realized that if she had been human in this world, she probably would have done the same thing, risking her life every day just to secure food. Her circumstances had been different, but the pain behind their choices was nearly identical. As Seely walked away, Kana lowered her eyes and whispered, "She's like me." After everyone was awake and had eaten, the group settled down to wait for Rei's return. The delay quickly became suspicious. Seely grew impatient and asked what was taking him so long. She had also chosen to sit beside Kana instead of her former teammates, showing how badly the group had been divided since she decided to leave. Kana eventually asked whether Rei was actually coming back. She had no urgent schedule, but even she was tired of waiting for him. Before Rei could appear, Thane suddenly suggested that they leave without him. Seely immediately found that strange. Under normal circumstances, Thane would never abandon Rei because doing so could cause serious trouble for him and possibly for his parents as well. Then Seely leaned close and warned Kana in a voice only she could hear. She did not know what Thane and the others were planning, but something clearly felt wrong, so Kana needed to keep her guard up. Kana already sensed the same problem. Thane's eyes kept shifting, making him look evasive. Lyserth also warned Kana to be ready to kill the humans if they betrayed her. After hearing Seely's story, Lyserth's opinion of her had improved slightly. It was not enough for complete trust, but Lyserth believed Seely probably would not attack Kana herself. Kana quietly promised to be careful. Thane then claimed he would leave a note for Rei and mark the trees so Rei could follow them without getting lost. Isabella and Ren agreed immediately. Seely looked to Kana first, and only after Kana nodded did she accept the plan. Thane picked up his shield, strapped it to his back, sheathed his short sword, and started toward the forest. Ren and Isabella followed. Unlike them, Seely already had her bow prepared with an arrow resting on the string. Before moving, she reminded Kana that if any of them tried something, she would cover her. Kana tested that promise, asking whether Seely could really attack her own human companions. Seely answered with a smile that she hated humans, so the answer was yes. Kana followed, but she still wondered whether Seely would truly act when the moment came. If she hesitated, Kana was prepared to kill all of them herself. To Kana, killing these humans would be no different from killing monsters. After everything she had suffered, and after hearing Seely's story, she had begun to believe that humans could be more monstrous than monsters. With Rei still overdue and Thane acting suspiciously, the group entered the forest under a fragile, uncertain alliance. The group had only just entered the forest when they encountered a pack of spiked monkeys. Their gray fur and small bodies made them look harmless, but they were dangerous in their territory. The monkeys stayed in the treetops and pulled thin spikes from their own backs before firing them at anyone below. Each spike regenerated within a few minutes, so a melee fighter could be overwhelmed by a constant supply of projectiles. Thane immediately moved ahead and drove his large shield into the ground. He activated Area Taunt, forcing every enemy within 3 meters to focus on him. He called for Seely and Ren to cover him, but the skill affected Kana as well. She suddenly felt an unnatural anger toward Thane and wondered whether he wanted her to bite him or burn him from behind. Seely realized what had happened and calmly placed a hand on Kana's head. She explained that Thane's taunt would not control a monster that simply ignored it. Kana accepted the explanation, though she still muttered that she would burn Thane later. Then she charged toward the monkeys. She had fought their kind before and knew their back spikes could not injure her. Before she reached them, Seely suddenly shouted a warning. Kana stopped, and a fireball flew past her head before crashing into the ground roughly 1 meter ahead. Kana turned toward Ren and demanded to know what she was doing. Ren apologized and called it a mistake, but the smile on her face made the truth obvious. Kana had not merely been caught in the attack. Ren had deliberately aimed at her, timing the shot so it would have struck if Kana had continued forward. Kana immediately canceled the deal and turned back toward the forest entrance. She refused to keep cooperating with humans who were trying to kill her. Thane shouted at Ren while still blocking the monkeys, but Ren only laughed and waved her hand. 10 people then emerged from the underbrush behind her. Ray led them, and the others appeared to be soldiers. Ren revealed that the group's friendly act was over. They had no reason to maintain the charade anymore. After Seely killed the monkeys, they intended to capture Kana not as a lizard but as a dragon and sell her for a huge reward. Kana faced 15 enemies, but Lyserth judged that every one of them was lower level. Even the soldiers had evolved only once. Although Kana herself had not evolved, her dragon nature put her on the level of a high-level first evolution human. Lyserth believed she could escape unharmed by breaking through their defensive line, and with careful tactics she might even defeat them all. Ray arrived laughing, acting as though he had simply joined the group at the right time. Ren immediately ran over and hugged him. Then she turned towards Seely and ordered her to finish off the monkeys. Seely raised her bow, but she was not aiming at the monkeys. Her arrow was pointed directly at Ren. Without hesitating, Seely released it. Ren reacted quickly and cast a wind wall, stopping the arrow before it could reach her. She demanded to know what Seely was doing and accused her of protecting the monster. Seely admitted that Kana was far more trustworthy than the people standing beside Ren. She had already suspected that Ren and Ray were hiding something. After the party escaped the three-eyed horned bear, the two of them had disappeared together. Seely mocked them for running off and suggested that Ray had promised Ren a large share of the reward money in exchange for helping capture Kana. Ren was furious, but Seely continued. Kana had saved the entire group from the bear, yet Ren was now turning against her. Seely also knew she sounded hypocritical since she had previously talked about killing Kana herself. However, she had never truly intended to take Kana's life. She had wanted to test Kana's strength and see what the dragon was capable of. Ren could not understand why Seely was protecting a monster. To her, Kana was only a dragon that could be sold for an enormous amount of money. She argued that Ray's father would pay handsomely if they brought him a real dragon. The truth was that Ray had already offered Ren a deal. After the bear attack, he pulled her aside and explained that he planned to capture Kana and deliver her to his father. In exchange for becoming his woman, Ren would receive a larger reward than the others. Greedy for money, Ren accepted immediately. Thane had also been forced to participate, whether he agreed with the plan or not. Isabella supported it through her connection to the Holy Church of Euthia, which looked down on other races. Seely was the only member of the party who had not been told what was happening. Ray disliked her and had intended to leave her behind when they returned to town for reinforcements. The group had planned to bring Kana back with them, then return to the forest without Seely. But Kana appeared outside the forest before they could carry out that plan. When Seely unknowingly asked Kana for help, she made it easier for everyone to keep Kana nearby. Now the secret was exposed, and Ren declared that Seely had become their enemy. She ordered the others to kill Seely and capture the lizard. Ray signaled his soldiers to attack. He even offered Seely a way to survive, saying that she could become his woman too. Seely rejected him and cursed humans for behaving this way. She drew 3 arrows at once and fired. The projectiles crossed the space with enough speed to surprise the soldiers. 2 men managed to dodge, but the 3rd arrow slipped between the metal plates on one soldier's chest and pierced him. Seely immediately jumped backward and kept firing, trying to hold off the attackers. While the soldiers focused on her, Kana watched from nearby. She still was not completely certain whether Seely had truly chosen her side. But the situation was clear enough. These people intended to kill Seely, and Seely had just risked herself to protect Kana. Kana wondered whether she should escape or eliminate the entire group. Lyserth gave her answer: they needed to kill the enemies immediately. Kana had the advantage in speed, and Lyserth instructed her to attack the woman who had cast the fireball at her earlier. If Kana pounced on Ren and bit through her neck, the fight could be decided quickly. Lyserth also told Kana not to fear the soldiers' swords. Kana's defense was strong enough to withstand their attacks with little or no damage. More importantly, Seely had proven that she was willing to stand against the party for Kana's sake. Lyserth would not allow her to be killed for that choice. Kana slipped into the bushes while the others remained focused on Seely. She moved around the group at high speed, using the confusion to position herself behind Ren. The enemies were so fixated on Seely that none of them noticed their real target had disappeared. Ren was the first to realize something was wrong. She suddenly shouted, asking where the dragon had gone. Kana answered from directly behind her. Right here, you stupid bitch. Ren spun around and tried to defend herself, but she was too slow. Kana pounced onto her shoulders and activated Bite. Her jaws clamped down on Ren's neck and her sharp teeth tore clean through it. Ren's head separated from her body almost instantly. Ray had been standing beside her, so the spray of blood covered him from head to toe. He froze, unable to process what had happened. Only when something wet struck his face and dropped to the ground did he regain focus. Looking down, Ray saw a chunk of flesh lying at his feet, still dripping with Kana's saliva. It was the piece of Ren's neck that Kana had bitten away. Kana wiped her mouth and looked disgusted by the taste. Humans taste nasty. Ren was dead, and the remaining soldiers had just watched their plan collapse in front of them. With Seely still fighting on one side and Kana now behind their formation, the situation erupted into an open battle. Isabella watched Ren die almost instantly and lost control of herself. Calling Kana a lizard, she raised her book, turned through its pages, and extended her free hand toward the young dragon. A bright golden light gathered around her fingers as she began chanting a binding spell. The attack was not ordinary magic. Isabella added an amplification chant before calling out the skill, and Lyserth immediately realized that Kana could be in serious danger if the spell connected. Kana's defenses could withstand normal sword strikes, but a properly amplified restraint spell was different. If it caught her in place, the soldiers might have been able to overwhelm her. Kana did not realize the danger until Lyserth shouted a warning, but before Isabella could finish the spell, an arrow pierced straight through her head. The chant stopped instantly. Isabella remained standing for a moment, her hand still pointed toward Kana and the arrow still lodged in her skull. Blood ran down the side of her face as her body swayed, then her strength gave out and she collapsed to the ground. Kana turned toward the source of the arrow and saw Seely still fighting off the soldiers. Seely had just saved her from being restrained, so Kana decided to return the favor. She smiled and declared that since Seely had helped her, she would help Seely as well. Kana launched herself into the air and spun around. Tail whip. Her tail struck Ray on the side of the head and sent him flying into a nearby tree. Kana did not consider him worth wasting time on. Her priority was the soldiers still chasing Seely. Seely had already been fighting for some time and her movements were slowing. She could not keep dodging their attacks forever. Kana charged toward the soldiers, then called out for Seely to stop fighting and retreat deeper into the forest. It was the only plan Kana could think of immediately. If Seely reached the thicker part of the forest, the trees and undergrowth could slow down the men pursuing her. Seely followed the order without hesitation. She jumped into the thicket and abandoned any attempt to continue attacking. Lyserth was surprised by how quickly she obeyed. Seely was human, yet she had killed one of her own kind to protect a dragon that humans viewed as a monster. Now she was also trusting Kana completely, leaving her own survival in Kana's hands. With Seely retreating, half of the soldiers shifted their attention toward Kana. That was exactly what Kana wanted. As the men ran after her, she snorted, shook her rear at them, and sprinted away in another direction. The gesture confused Lyserth, who could only react with disbelief, but Kana was deliberately drawing the soldiers away from Seely. Lyserth asked what her plan was. Kana explained that she wanted to get rid of the soldiers quickly before returning to Seely. Seely had protected her when Kana's guard was down, and Kana understood that the arrow had prevented the binding spell from hitting her. Lyserth confirmed that her warning had been serious. She did not normally interrupt Kana for attacks that could not harm her, and the spell's amplification had made this one dangerous. While Kana led the soldiers through the forest, Ray finally pulled himself up from the ground. One side of his face was swollen from Kana's tail strike, and his anger quickly replaced any concern for the people around him. He ranted about waiting until his father was no longer parading Kana around and promised to make her suffer for hitting him and killing Ren. He was also furious that he had not yet gotten what he wanted from Seely. Thane called out to him from nearby. He was surrounded by an increasing number of spiked monkeys and was using his shield to block their attacks. Every time he lowered his guard, more spikes came flying from the trees, and he knew he would not survive without assistance. Ray looked at Thane, his most loyal remaining subordinate. For a moment, it seemed possible that he might help the man who had stayed behind to protect him, but Ray still wanted to pursue Kana, and he also wanted to capture Seely. Instead of helping, he told Thane to hold on a little longer and promised to return quickly. Then Ray ran in the direction Seely had taken. Thane watched him disappear between the trees. The betrayal was obvious. Thane had risked his life protecting Ray, but Ray had abandoned him the moment he saw an opportunity to chase after Kana and Seely. With the monkeys closing in and no help coming, Thane finally gave up on waiting. He apologized to his parents, then grabbed the end of his shield and spun around with it extended in front of him. The improvised attack struck at the monkeys in the trees before Thane threw the shield away. However, the move left him exposed. Hundreds of spikes struck him during the attempt. Some bounced off his armor, but others slipped through the gaps and pierced his body. Blood began running between the plates. Thane forced himself to turn and run while the monkeys continued making noises from the branches, almost as if they were laughing at him. More spikes struck his armor and body as he fled. The blood loss became severe, his vision blurred and his movements slowed. He only managed to reach the place where Ren's and Isabella's bodies had fallen before his legs gave out. Thane collapsed into a pool of his own blood, too injured and exhausted to continue. The monkeys noticed that their prey had fallen. They bounced excitedly through the branches, then 10 of them climbed down once they were certain no other soldiers were nearby. 3 monkeys seized Isabella's body and dragged it into the forest. 4 more grabbed the still semi-conscious Thane and pulled him after them. When the remaining monkeys reached Ren's body, 2 took hold of her ankles and followed the others. The last monkey treated Ren's severed head like a toy. It tossed the head into the air, performed a handstand, and caught it with its feet. Then it threw it up again, flipped upright, caught it with its tail, and ran after the others. Soon, the bodies were gone. Only the pools of blood soaking into the ground and the trail leading deeper into the forest remained. Meanwhile, Kana continued drawing the soldiers away, separating the 5 men from one another as she began hunting them through the trees. The 5 soldiers kept chasing Kana, but the gap refused to close. Even when they pushed themselves to run faster, the small dragon stayed ahead of them. Every so often, she slowed down, stopped, and shook her rear at them, deliberately giving them a chance to catch up. Lyserth had Kana lead these 5 farther away from the others before attacking. If the remaining soldiers could not see what was happening, they would be less likely to prepare for Kana's abilities, making the next fight easier. Once they were far enough away, Kana slid to a stop and turned around. The 5 men halted in front of her with their swords drawn. Seeing that she had stopped, the lead soldier assumed she had finally run out of energy. He offered her a chance to surrender and follow them to their master, claiming they would not hurt her if she cooperated. Kana only grinned. She whispered something too quietly for the men to understand, then pointed at her throat and gestured for them to come closer. The soldiers fell for it. The leader stepped within a meter of her and asked if something was wrong with her throat. Instead of answering, Kana opened her mouth and inhaled deeply. Then she shouted, "Baby breath." A burst of flame erupted from her mouth and spread into a wide cone. All 5 soldiers were caught before they could react. Fire covered their bodies and their screams echoed through the forest. Some fell down and rolled across the ground, desperately trying to extinguish the flames. Others ran in panic while still burning. Their efforts were useless. A dragon's fire could not be put out easily, and the soldiers continued burning where they stood. As Kana watched, a notification appeared. Her level increased from 3 to 4, giving her 5 status points. Lyserth immediately told her to place all 5 points into agility if she wanted to save the human girl. Kana followed the instruction without hesitation. Her agility rose from 20 to 25 and her remaining status points returned to 0. With the soldiers behind her, Kana focused on the next objective. She caught Seely's scent in one direction and immediately ran after it, following the trail toward the place where Seely was being cornered by the remaining enemies. Seely was exhausted, but the soldiers chasing her still refused to give up. She looked back while running and shouted that they were incredibly persistent. One of the men, who still had an arrow lodged in his chest, yelled that she should never have attacked them in the first place. The arrow clearly hurt him, but he continued pursuing her anyway. As Seely pushed through the forest, she began wondering whether Kana would really return to help her. She wanted to believe Kana was different from the humans chasing her. More than that, she needed Kana to be trustworthy, because being captured would mean suffering the same fate as her mother. Those memories started replaying in Seely's mind. The fear made her eyes fill with tears, and the tears blurred the ground ahead. She misjudged her next step, caught her foot on a tree root, and went flying forward. Her body crashed into the forest floor and slid across the dirt before finally stopping. Seely tried to stand, but a sharp pain shot through her leg, forcing a scream from her. Even injured, she refused to stay down. She gritted her teeth, grabbed the nearby tree, and pulled herself upright with her back against the trunk. Then she drew her bow, notched her final arrow, and aimed at the soldier in front of her. The man simply swung his sword and knocked the arrow aside. He laughed, saying that Seely had led them a long way, but luck was finally on their side. After looking her up and down, he turned toward the other soldiers and suggested they have their way with her before killing her. The others immediately agreed. One soldier even began undoing his belt while saying their boss had only ordered them to kill her, so there was no reason they could not take turns first. The man with the arrow in his chest then told them to decide who would go first. They began flipping a coin, calling heads and tails as Seely watched helplessly. With the soldiers distracted, Seely's expression turned bitter. She understood what they intended to do, and she could not bear the thought of repeating her mother's fate. Instead of waiting for them to reach her, she pulled the dagger from her side and pressed its point against her chest. Tears finally streamed down her face. Seely took a deep breath and whispered that she would see her father soon, then hoped her mother would be there too. She began pushing the dagger inward, but the tip had only just pierced her skin when a familiar voice suddenly rang through the trees. "I choose tails." Seely froze. Kana burst from behind the trees, spinning through the air before bringing her tail down in a powerful tail whip. It struck the soldier with the arrow in his chest directly on the head, stopping the immediate threat and saving Seely from both the soldiers and herself. For the first time since the chase began, Seely felt completely relieved. Seeing Kana return exactly as promised proved that she could trust her with her life. Smiling through uncontrollable tears, Seely called out, "Kana, you really came." Kana stood on the soldier she had just knocked down, wagging her tail while striking a proud victory pose. Then she turned toward Seely and eagerly asked whether her entrance had looked cool and heroic. Seely could hardly decide whether to laugh or cry, but her bright smile and nod gave Kana the answer she wanted. Kana proudly placed her hands on her hips, lifted her snout, and snorted. The surviving soldiers quickly recovered from their shock. One of them complained that Kana had interrupted what they were doing and ordered the others to capture her so they could return to Seely. Before they could regroup, Lyserth warned Kana that another person was hiding in the bushes nearby. Kana happily agreed to finish the fight. Her mood had improved after Seely praised her, and she immediately rushed the closest soldier with claw and bite. Her claws opened a deep gash across his chest, and her teeth pierced his neck in the same fluid attack. Using his falling body as a springboard, Kana launched herself at the next soldier and repeated the combination. Within moments, 2 more soldiers were dead. The remaining man began backing away, realizing that he was not being paid enough to face an opponent this fast. Kana noticed his retreat and charged after him. When he swung his sword, she used her hind legs to kick the weapon aside, spun through the air, and struck him with tail whip before following up with claw. That left only one soldier, who attacked while Kana was landing. He brought his sword down directly onto her back. Seely shouted her name, and the impact produced a loud metallic clang. Both Seely and the soldier expected blood, but Kana's scales had stopped the blade completely. Kana only frowned and looked back over her shoulder, confused that the man had tried to stab her from behind. To her, the sword had not even been a real threat. The soldier's attack had confirmed what Rei already feared. Kana was effectively unstoppable against ordinary weapons. Kana finished the last soldier with 2 rapid claw strikes. Then she asked Lyserth where the final enemy was hiding. Lyserth detected that the remaining target was fleeing south. Kana told Seely she would return shortly, and immediately ran into the forest. Rei was sprinting away as fast as he could. After watching his men fall and seeing a sword strike fail against Kana's scales, he no longer believed she was a normal dragon. In his panic, he called her a demon and blamed his father for sending him against something that could not be harmed by swords. He kept running until a thorn caught his pant leg and sent him stumbling. When Rei looked up, Kana was already standing ahead of him. He screamed for her to stay away, but Kana treated the encounter like a casual reunion. She said Seely would probably want to speak with him because his men had tried to kill her, and Kana also wanted a few words of her own. Then Kana wrapped her tail around Rei's neck and dragged him back through the forest. She joked about inviting him for tea but showed no concern for his comfort. His body slammed against the ground repeatedly, scraped over sharp rocks, and was pulled through thorn-filled thickets until Kana brought him back to Seely badly injured and unable to escape. After Kana disappeared into the forest, Seely finally released a sigh of relief. She had been saved, and once again Kana had not let her down. Seely had never trusted her life to anyone before, but when Kana told her to stop fighting and run, she somehow believed Kana would come back after dealing with the 5 men she had lured away. Looking down, Seely saw her swollen ankle, the cuts across her skin, and the clothes torn apart during the escape. Instead of despairing, she laughed bitterly. She hated being trapped in what she called disgusting human skin and wished she were anything but human. That hatred had only grown stronger during the day. In Seely's mind, humans were so vile that wiping out the entire species no longer seemed excessive. Then something rustled in the nearby bushes. A battered body was thrown onto the ground in front of her. One glance showed Seely that the person had suffered severe injuries, including multiple broken bones. Kana stepped out and announced that she had brought the fake smiling guy back for tea. Sitting directly on top of the bloody prisoner, she failed to understand how he had ended up in such terrible condition. Seely recognized Rei and burst out laughing. When she pointed out that there was no tea anywhere nearby, Kana became embarrassed and admitted she had only brought him back so Seely could speak to him. If Seely had nothing to say, Kana offered to punish him instead by blowing fire up his rear. Seely looked down at Rei's battered body and formed a small smile. Despite his injuries and the blood he had lost, he still had enough strength to laugh when she condemned him. She reminded him that, as a noble, he had fallen so far that he was now barely more than a dying worm. He had wanted to kill her, yet he still wondered why she had never liked him. To Sally, nobles and ordinary humans were no different. They saw something they wanted and took it, regardless of who suffered. Ray called her selfish for abandoning humanity to protect a monster. Sally rejected that accusation. In her view, selfishness was not determined by who someone chose to stand beside, but by what they were willing to do to others. Ray had tried to take Kana back to his father against Kana's will simply to satisfy his father. Years earlier, another noble had destroyed Sally's family, killed her father, burned down their home, and tried to take her mother because he desired her. She said that Ren, Isabel, Thane, and the other nobles were all the same. They showed the public a pleasant face while secretly scheming for their own benefit. Sally hated being human and wished she had never been born one, but watching a powerful noble collapse because of his own plans was satisfying. With that, she turned away from Ray and told Kana to do whatever she wanted with him. After finally saying everything she had kept inside, some of the weight on her shoulders seemed to lift. Kana immediately decided Ray's punishment should be based on a different crime. She narrowed her eyes and asked whether he had eaten the last of her horned rabbit. Kana was certain she had saved one leg for breakfast, only to wake up and find it missing. Before Ray could answer, she began striking him with her tail. Lyserth pointed out that he could not respond while Kana kept hitting him, but Kana only crossed her arms, snorted, and smacked him once more. Ray finally screamed that he had never touched her rabbit. Kana admitted that she might have been mistaken, although Ray's smile had made him look exactly like the kind of person who would steal it. In any case, she had already chosen his punishment. She jumped behind him, inhaled deeply, and prepared to breathe fire. Ray tried to stop her by offering money. Kana did not understand why he thought money would help. She was a dragon, and she could not simply visit a town and spend it. A moment later, his body was burning. Ray's screams continued as Kana's fire consumed him alive. Once Ray was roasting, Kana lost interest and returned to Sally. She asked what Sally planned to do next. Sally had no answer. Returning to town would likely lead Ray's father's people straight to her, where they would demand to know what had happened to his son. She hated humanity while still being human herself, and now had nowhere she could safely belong. She had turned her back on the people she once considered her own, but had not decided where to go afterward. Lyserth then suggested that Sally travel with Kana for the time being. She still warned Kana not to trust humans, but Sally's hatred of human greed had proven genuine and her actions had impressed Lyserth. In her judgment, Sally deserved at least some trust. Kana accepted the idea without much hesitation. Sally had already helped her several times, and Kana thought having another person around would make the journey more entertaining. She even described Sally as a pet human, though she clearly meant it as a practical arrangement rather than an insult. Kana explained that she had no destination planned. She only wanted to keep leveling up, learn stronger and more interesting spells, find good food, and see the sights along the way. She expected that eventually she might figure out what she truly wanted from life. For now, she was satisfied with traveling, defeating enemies, and eating whatever she could find. Sally smiled and agreed to join her. With nowhere else to go, roaming the lands beside Kana sounded like the best choice available. Their alliance was unusual, but from that point forward, the dragon and the human became traveling companions. Behind them, Ray's cries finally stopped. His body had turned completely black while the flames continued to burn. Neither Kana nor Lyserth noticed the man watching from far outside Lyserth's detection range. Yellow magic circles spun within his eyes as he observed the failed capture. He concluded that his master's son had failed to secure the dragon and needed to report it immediately. After jumping from the tree, he activated a spell called Accelerate and vanished in an instant. Only rustling leaves remained. Ray's father would likely learn that the mission had failed, while Kana and Sally moved on together under the setting sun. Kana's journey had only just begun. Ray's defeat settles the immediate conflict, but it also confirms that Kana and Sally's new partnership has already attracted attention far beyond the forest. As they begin their journey together, Ray's father learns that the dragon escaped and refuses to let the failure go. He plans to gather soldiers, adventurers, and even the city's healthy men for a hunt, ordering them to bring Kana back alive. Sally is marked for capture as well, leaving the pair with no safe return and an enemy preparing on a much larger scale. While Sally gathers what little remains from her former party and offers Kana a fishing rod, blanket, and pillow, an entire city is being mobilized against them. How will Kana and Sally survive the pursuit once Walter Lamfield's forces set out for the dragon?